Look, I'm not senile. That's the first thing you need to understand. My body might be a crumbling Victorian mansion or creaking floorboards and faulty plumbing, but the wiring in the attic, state of the art, sharp as a tack. I just choose, most of the time, to let people believe otherwise. It's more entertaining that way. It gives me a front row seat to the true, unfiltered show of human nature. And let me tell you, the performance my family has been putting on is a goddamn masterpiece of greed and hypocrisy. It all started, as these things often do, after a fall. Not a dramatic, life-altering tumble down the stairs, mind you, just a stupid, graceless slip on a throw rug in the hallway, a rug my granddaughter, Chloe, had bought because it was aesthetic. Aesthetic. I spent a night in the hospital for observation, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the low, serious murmurs of my children discussing my future as if I were a problematic parcel that needed rerouting. That was the moment I saw it, clear as day. The vultures were circling, and they hadn't even waited for the body to get cold. Not that I was dying, just bruised. But the bruise wasn't just on my hip, it was on my soul. My wife, Eleanor, has been gone 5 years, and every day since has been a lesson in solitude. But this was different. This was a chilling preview of coming attractions, a future of being shuffled between my daughter's to clean house where it'd be an inconvenient piece of furniture, and my son's place where it'd be largely ignored. A ghost in the corner of a room dominated by giant televisions and the constant blare of video games. They were in the hallway, just outside my hospital room, and they thought I was asleep. The morphine drip was a wonderful thing. It made me loopy enough to keep my eyes closed, but lucid enough to hear every damning word. We can't just have him go back to that big house alone, David. It's irresponsible. My daughter, Susan, whispered. She's 52 and runs her life, and everyone else is, with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate middle manager, which she is. So what's the alternative? Hey, stubborn as a mule. Do you think he'll agree to move? That was my son, David. His voice always carries a faint note of exasperation, as if the world is a slightly inconvenient app that keeps crashing. We'll have to make him see reason, for his own good. And while we're at it, we need to talk about the financial situation. The house, the investments, Mom's jewelry. We need to get things in order before Susan's voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the antiseptic air. Before you lose your marbles, old man. Jesus, Sue. Hay's got a broken hip, not a terminal diagnosis. It's a slippery slope, David. You know that, and we need to be prepared. We have to think of the kids. Chloe's college tuition is astronomical, and Mark's little startup, that was it. The trigger. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their inheritance. My life's work, the fortune he'd built from nothing but emigrating here with Eleanor, with just a suitcases and a head full of dreams, had been reduced to a line item in their future budgets. Chloe's tuition, Mark's failing tech startup, my grandson, Mark, who hadn't called me in 6 months except to ask if I wanted to get in on the ground floor of some app that delivered artisanal kale to your door. A cold, hard knot of anger formed in my gut, cutting through the morphine haze. They saw me as a wallet with a heartbeat, a problem to be managed, an obstacle between them and their payday. Fine. If that's the game they wanted to play, it'd play. But it'd play to win. The idea didn't come to me all at once. It fermented during the long, boring days of physiotherapy, where a cheerful woman named Brenda tried to get me to squeeze a rubber ball as if my future depended on it. It took shape during the stilted, awkward visits from my family, where they'd bring me bland hospital pudding and make strange small talk, their eyes constantly flicking around the room, assessing, calculating. The final piece clicked into place one afternoon when Susan was helping me by going through my mail at home. She held up a brochure for Golden Years Home Care. Look at this, Dad. We've been looking into some options, just for a little help around the house. Someone to cook, clean, make sure you're taking your pills. Her tone was sugary, condescending. It would give us all such peace of mind, peace of their minds, so they wouldn't have to actually do the work themselves. I gave her my best befuddled expression, letting my lower lip tremble just a bit. A stranger. In the house, Eleanor wouldn't have liked that. Mom would have wanted you to be safe, Susan said, patting my hand with the mechanical sympathy of an ATM dispensing cash. I let the idea hang there for a moment, watching her, seeing the wheels turning. She saw it as her idea, her solution. Perfect. I suppose if it's just for a little while, I mumbled, looking down at my hands. But I get to choose. I won't have some brute man handling me. I want someone kind. A young person. Someone with light in them. I laid it on thick, pouring on the frail, eccentric old man routine. Susan's eyes lit up. She'd gotten her way. Of course, Dad. Of course you can choose. Well, get some candidates. You can interview them. Oh, I would interview them. But not for the reason she thought. The next day, from my hospital bed, I made a call. Not to a caregiving agency. I called an old friend, Arthur Mendelsohn. Artie and I go back 60 years. Had started a private investigation firm by retiring from the force. A small, discreet operation. I told him what I needed. It wasn't a bodyguard or a nurse. It was an actor. The perfect performer for the grand production I was about to stage. I need someone sharp, arty, impeccable credentials, but entirely fictional. Someone kind-faced, genuinely compassionate, because I won't have a cruel person in my home, even as part of a ruse, but with a core of steel. They need to be able to lie to my family's faces with the sincerity of a saint. Artie, God love him, didn't miss a beat. Revenge plot. Tom, I always said you had a novelist's flair for the dramatic. Call it a final audit, I said, a smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. I'm assessing the true value of my heirs. A week later, I was back in my house, the big, old place filled with the ghosts of Eleanor and the life we built. It felt emptier than ever. Susan had set up 3 interviews with caregivers from various agencies. She'd vetted them for compatibility, which I knew meant she'd picked the ones who seemed the most malleable, the least likely to cause trouble or question her authority. The first was a woman in her 50s, another Brenda, who spoke to me in the slow, loud tone people use on foreigners and the very stupid. And well, make sure you get your nice lunch, won't we, Mr. Tom? The second was a young man, muscle-bound and sullen, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He spent the entire interview looking at his phone. The third was Susan's favorite, a woman named Carol, who was about Susan's age and spent more time talking to Susan about neighborhood gossip and real estate prices than she did looking at me. I could see it in Susan's eyes. She'd found her spy. A pair of eyes and ears in my house who would report back to her. I pretended to be tired and confused after the third interview. They're all very loud. I whined to Susan. I don't like them. Dad, you have to pick one. Carol is lovely. She's very experienced. I want to see one more. I insisted, putting a petulant whine in my voice. Just one more. Place called Serenity Care. I saw a commercial. The girl in the commercial had a nice smile. There was no commercial. Serenity Care was the shell company he had created, complete with a professional website and glowing testimonials. Susan, exasperated, humored me. She looked it up. It seems small, Dad. Are you sure? We have excellent candidates from the larger agencies. I want the girl with the nice smile. I insisted, like a child asking for a specific cereal. And so, the stage was set. Maria arrived precisely on time the next day. Artie had done his work well. She was in her mid-20s, with a calm, open face and warm, intelligent eyes that didn't dart around the room assessing its value. She wore simple, practical clothes and carried a folder with her credentials. She shook my hand firmly but gently. Her smile was, indeed, nice. It reached her eyes. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Abernathy, she said. Her voice was clear and calm, without a trace of condescension. Susan was there, of course, hovering like a hawk. She immediately launched into her interrogation. Your agency is rather new, isn't it? What are your qualifications? Experience with mobility issues, administering medication. Maria fielded the questions with a preternatural calm. She spoke about her training, her philosophy of care which focused on dignity and independence. It was all a beautifully constructed fiction, but she delivered it with such conviction that even I was almost convinced. She'd done her homework on my condition, on the medications I was taking. Artie had provided a full dossier, but the real test came about 20 minutes in. Susan's phone rang, something urgent sounding from work, and she had to step out to take it. The moment she left the room, Maria's entire posture shifted. The professional caregiver persona softened. She looked at me, really looked at me. "The Braves are having a rough season, aren't they, Mr. Abernathy?" she said, nodding toward the game I had muted on the television. I blinked. It was a test. A subtle one. Artie knew I was a lifelong, suffering Braves fan. It was in the dossier. But the way she said it wasn't rote. It was conversational. "The bullpen is a disaster," I grumbled, playing along. "They always are," she said with a small, knowing smile. "But Acura Jr. is a joy to watch. It's like Hayes playing a different game." And that was it. She'd passed. She hadn't tried to patronize me. She hadn't talked down to me. She'd found a point of common, normal human connection. It was, I realized, the first normal conversation I'd had with anyone under the age of 60 in my own home since Eleanor died. When Susan came back in, all business and efficiency, Maria smoothly transitioned back into interview mode. But a silent understanding passed between us. The game was afoot. "Well, I think we have some excellent options, Dad," Susan said, clearly ready to steamroll me into choosing Carol. "I want her," I said, pointing a wobbly finger at Maria. Susan's smile tightened. "Don't you want to think about it? Carol has decades of experience. This young lady is very new." "I like her," I said, layering on the stubbornness. "She reminds me of Eleanor when she was young." It was a low blow, and I knew it. Susan's face softened for a microsecond at the mention of her mother, then hardened again. She couldn't argue with a ghost. "Well, if you're sure." "I'm sure." And so, Maria came into my life. The first week was a feeling out period. She was, to my genuine surprise and relief, excellent at her job. She was strong enough to help me maneuver around without making me feel helpless. She cooked simple, delicious meals. She kept the house clean, but didn't move things around, respecting the fragile ecosystem of memories I lived in. She learned my routines, my small eccentricities, the way I liked my tea, the specific chair I preferred to sit in to read the paper. We developed a rhythm, and we developed a code. When the family was around, I would play the doting, slightly senile old man, and she would play the kind, perhaps slightly naive, caregiver. When we were alone, we could talk, really talk, about baseball, about books, about the news. She was whip smart and had a dry, wicked sense of humor that she kept carefully hidden. I found myself looking forward to her shifts with a genuine excitement I hadn't felt in years. The change was immediate and dramatic. With Maria handling the heavy lifting, my family's visits, which had been infrequent and duty-bound, suddenly became more frequent. It was as if they'd been waiting for a supervisor to be installed before they could clock in for their shifts of faux concern. They came to check on Maria, to see how things were going. It started subtly. Susan would drop by unannounced, her eyes scanning the rooms like a CC tech looking for evidence of incompetence. She'd run a finger over the mantelpiece, checking for dust. She'd interrogate Maria about my meals, my medication schedule. "He seems to be having a lot of red meat, Maria. We need to watch his cholesterol. He asked for a steak, Miss Abernathy. I believe in honoring his preferences where it's safe to do so." "Well, I'm just not sure. Perhaps a salad instead." I'd sit in my armchair, pretending to doze, listening to my daughter try to manage my diet from afar. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. David came by on a Saturday, bringing my grandson, Mark, in tow. Mark, for once, wasn't glued to his phone. He was too busy staring at Maria, who was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a sweater. She was, undeniably, a very attractive young woman, and Mark, whose startup was apparently an app for rating local beer gardens, was clearly smitten. "So, Maria," David said, his voice too loud, too hearty, "this is a great service you provide. Really noble." Not many young people are so caring. It was an insult disguised as a compliment, the implication being that she was either a saint or there was something wrong with her. Maria just smiled sweetly. It's a job, Mr. Abernathy, but a rewarding one. Your father is a wonderful man. He has so many fascinating stories. David and Mark exchanged a glance. A look I knew well. It was the same look they'd shared when he'd tried to explain the value of hard work to them years ago. A look of patronizing dismissal. Oh, how cute. The old man's telling his stories again. I'll bet, David said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Listen, if you ever need anything, if he ever gets to be too much, you have my number. Don't hesitate to call me directly. We're the ones ultimately responsible for him. The message was clear. You work for us, not for him. Remember where your real loyalty should lie. Maria just nodded. Of course. Thank you. The jealousy was a slow-acting poison, but I could see it beginning to work its way into their systems. They were used to me being a difficult, curmudgeonly old bastard. They were prepared for that. They knew how to handle my grumpiness, my stubbornness. It was a known quantity. What they didn't know how to handle was me being happy. I began to lay it on thick. When Susan visited, it'd gush. Did you taste the soup Maria made? It's just like my mother used to make. She's an angel, that girl. An absolute angel. She found my old photo albums, Sue. We spent the whole afternoon going through them. She's so interested in the family history. I saw Susan's jaw tighten. It asked her to look at those same albums a dozen times. She'd always been too busy. I started making little comments in front of David. Maria's father is in investments, you know. Very sharp man. We had a great chat about the market. She comes from such good stock. She fixed that rattling drawer in the kitchen that's been driving me mad for years. Your mother always hated that drawer. Why didn't you ever fix it, David? His face would cloud over. I was comparing him, unfavorably, to the hired help. The masterpiece, however, was my granddaughter, Chloe. She was 20, art student, and embodied a special kind of modern narcissism that believed taking a black and white photograph of her breakfast was a profound artistic statement. She came over one afternoon, not to see me, but to borrow a vintage necklace of her grandmother's that she'd decided would be perfect for some party. She found Maria and me in the garden. Maria was helping me tend to Eleanor's rose bushes, something I hadn't had the heart or the physical ability to do since she died. My hands were dirty, and I was smiling, actually smiling, as Maria showed me how to properly prune a hybrid tea rose. Chloe stood on the patio, her phone in her hand, looking at us as if we were performing an obscure and slightly distasteful ritual. Grandpa, what are you doing? You'll hurt yourself. Nonsense, Chloe. Maria's teaching me. Look, the Elizabeth Taylor rose is finally blooming again. Your grandmother's favorite. Chloe's eyes narrowed, focusing on Maria. I need to get into Grandma's jewelry box. The key, it's on my key ring. In the bowl by the door, I said, not looking away from the rose. She disappeared inside and came out a few minutes later, the antique silver necklace clasped around her neck. It looked absurd with her ripped band t-shirt. What do you think? She asked, striking a pose. Lovely, dear, I said absently. It was your grandmother's, Maria said softly, genuinely. She wore it on her wedding day. It's beautiful on you. Chloe's face, which had been preening, instantly soured. The approval she'd been fishing for from me had been given, effortlessly, and with more historical knowledge, by Maria. It was as if Maria had trespassed on a sacred family memory. How would you know when she wore it? Chloe snapped, her voice losing its performative sweetness. Maria didn't flinch. Your grandfather told me. He talks about her all the time. He must love telling you those stories. It was a perfectly aimed torpedo. Chloe had never once asked about her grandmother's wedding day. She had no interest. The shot landed. Chloe's face flushed. She looked from Maria to me, her expression a mixture of outrage and confusion. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by the help. Without another word, she turned and flounced out of the garden, the screen door slamming shut behind her. I looked at Maria. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She gave me a slight nod. The war was going perfectly. The tension escalated from a slow simmer to a rolling boil over the next month. The family meetings began. They'd happen in the living room, with me ostensibly dozing in my chair, while they talked in hushed, urgent tones in the kitchen. Hayes giving her jewelry. David. Mom's jewelry. Chloe saw it. A pair of emerald earrings. Hayes just confused. Sue. He probably thinks she's Mom. Hayes not that confused. He called me Susan the other day. Not that woman who bothers me every Tuesday. Hayes sharp as a tack when he wants to be. Hayes being manipulated. Have you seen the way he looks at her? It's inappropriate. We need to do something. We need to get a proper caregiver in there. This girl I don't trust her. She's too smooth. Too perfect. They thought they were being quiet. But the house he'd built for Eleanor had old, solid walls that carried sound in strange ways. I heard every word, and I cherished them. I upped the ante. I started talking about changing my will. I did it in front of Susan. Maria was helping me with some correspondence and other fiction. As my hands were steady, and my eyesight was fine, and I said, loudly, remind me, Maria, to call old man Henderson next week. I need to talk to him about making some adjustments. Susan, who was just stopping by to drop off some groceries and check the contents of my fridge, froze. Adjustments to what, Dad? Oh, nothing important, dear, I said, waving a dismissive hand. Just some boring legal things. Henderson's been my lawyer for 40 years. Hayes getting on, though. Need to get things in order. The color drained from Susan's face. Your will. Why would you need to adjust your will? Well, things change, I said, giving her a vague, watery smile. People come into your life. You want to show your appreciation. Maria here. She's been such a godsend. I was thinking of leaving her a little something. A token. Maybe that little cottage upstate. Nobody uses it anymore. The cottage was a dilapidated shack on a lake. It was worth maybe $50,000. A pittance compared to my overall estate. But to Susan, it was the principle. It was a breach in the fortress wall. It was an outsider laying claim to what was rightfully theirs. Dad, you can't be serious, she said, her voice tight. That's family property. It's my property. I corrected her gently, but with an edge she hadn't heard in years. And I can do what I like with it. Maria, make a note. Talk to Henderson about the Pine Lake cottage. Of course, Mr. Abernathy, Maria said, her face a perfect mask of neutral professionalism. I watched Susan's composure crack. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. The vulture wasn't just circling anymore, it looked like the carcass was getting up and walking away. That night, my phone rang. It was David. Dad, what's this about you changing your will? Susan's hysterical. Oh, for heaven's sake, David. It's just a cottage. It's full of mice and memories. Let the girl have it. She deserves it more than you lot do. You never even visit the place. This isn't about the cottage, Dad, and you know it. This is about some stranger taking advantage of you. We're your family. Are you? I said quietly. Sometimes it's hard to tell. I hung up on his sputtering. I felt a thrill of dark satisfaction. The hook was set. Now I just had to play them. The following Sunday, I decided to stage the pièce de résistance. I announced that I was feeling strong enough to have the whole family over for dinner. Susan, David, their spouses, Chloe, Mark, all of them. Maria will cook, I declared. She makes a magnificent coq au vin, just like your mother used to make, Susan. The dinner was a masterpiece of awkward tension. Maria moved through the dining room, ghost, serving food, refilling wine glasses, her expression serene and unreadable. My family sat around the table built with my own hands 40 years ago, their faces carved into masks of polite hostility. The food was, in fact, magnificent, but no one commented on it. They picked at their plates, making strange small talk that died almost as soon as it was born. I waited until dessert was served, a perfect heart-tapping, before I began my performance. I reached out and patted Maria's hand as she set my plate down. You've outdone yourself, my dear. Truly. This family hasn't eaten this well since Eleanor passed. I let my eyes get watery. You've brought such light back into this old house. Such joy. I don't know what I would do without you." I saw Susan's knuckles whiten as she gripped her fork. David stared into his wineglass as if seeking answers at the bottom. "You know," I continued, my voice trembling with feigned emotion, "I've been thinking, this big old house is too much for me. Too many memories. When I'm gone," I let the words hang there. The room was silent enough to hear the clock ticking in the hall. "When I'm gone," I repeated. "It should go to someone who will fill it with life again, with laughter, not someone who will just sell it to the highest bidder to split the proceeds." I turned to Maria, taking both of her hands in mine. They were warm and steady. Mine were performing a perfect tremor. "Maria, I want you to have it. This house, I'm leaving it to you." The silence shattered. Chloe gasped. Mark dropped his fork with a clatter. Susan half froze from her chair. "Dad, you can't be serious. You are not giving our family home to the help." The mask was off. The word help was spat out like a piece of rotten meat. Maria's face was a study in shock. It was, I realized, genuine. This particular twist hadn't been in the script. Artie's brief was to make the family jealous, to expose their greed. I'd just gone completely off plan. It told her I was going to make a grand gesture, but I hadn't specified what. The raw, stunned look in her eyes was better than anything I could have directed. "Miss Abernathy," Maria began, her composure finally cracking. "Stay out of this," Susan shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at her. "This is a family matter. You've manipulated him. You've preyed on a lonely old man. He'll have you arrested. He'll have you investigated." "That's enough, Susan," I said, my voice dropping its quaver, gaining a steel they hadn't heard in a decade. But she was beyond listening. The dam had broken. Years of avarice and entitlement came flooding out. "You stupid old man," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "Can't you see what she's doing? She's stealing from us, from your own grandchildren. That house is ours. Everything is ours. We've earned it. We've put up with your miserable, selfish behavior for years, and now you want to give it all away to some gold-digging slut you've known for 5 minutes." The word hung in the air, ugly and brutal. David was staring at his sister, his mouth agape, but he wasn't contradicting her. He was just shocked she'd said the quiet part out loud. I didn't look at them. I looked at Maria. Her initial shock had been replaced by a cold, still calm. She met my gaze, and in her eyes, I saw no fear, only a question. "Is this it? Is this the moment?" I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She took a slow, deliberate breath. Then she turned to face my family. The kind, gentle caregiver was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Her posture straightened. Her shoulders went back. The warmth in her eyes cooled into something analytical, detached, and utterly professional. "Ms. Abernathy," Maria said, her voice clear, calm, and cutting through the hysterical atmosphere like a scalpel. "Mr. Abernathy, David, perhaps you should all sit down." She didn't wait for them to comply. She walked over to the sideboard, where she'd placed her large leather bag. It wasn't a nurse's bag. It was a briefcase. She unzipped it and pulled out a thin, professional folder. "My name is Maria Flores. That much is true," she said, her voice even and precise. "But I am not, strictly speaking, a caregiver employed by Serenity Care." She opened the folder. "I am a licensed private investigator, employed by Mendelssohn and Associates. Your father hired me 6 weeks ago." She pulled out a stack of photographs and documents and placed them on the table, one by one, like a dealer dealing a hand of cards. "My primary assignment was not to provide care, but to observe, to document, to assess the nature of the relationships within this family following Mr. Abernathy's hospitalization." She slid a photograph towards Susan. It was a time-stamped image of Susan and David talking outside my hospital room door. "This was taken approximately 3 minutes after you began discussing the need to get his financial affairs in order and the burden of his care on your respective families." She slid another document toward David. It was a transcript, his own words, about me being stubborn as a mule. Stared back at him in cold, official typeface. My secondary assignment, Maria continued, her voice never wavering, was to act as a catalyst, to present a perceived threat to the inheritance you all clearly value more than the man who earned it. My role was to be the kind, attentive outsider whom your father could ostensibly favor, thereby provoking your true, unfiltered reactions. She looked at each of them in turn. Susan was white as a sheet, her hand over her mouth. David had sunk into his chair, his face ashen. Chloe and Mark just looked bewildered. The performance tonight, Maria said, a hint of that dry humor returning to her voice, including the offer of the house, was unscripted, a dramatic flourish on your father's part, but your reactions were entirely authentic. She closed the folder. My final report will be on Mr. Abernathy's desk tomorrow morning. It will contain a full accounting of my observations, along with audio and video recordings all obtained legally. I assure you of the conversations that have taken place in this home over the last 6 weeks. It will detail the numerous attempts to undermine your father's autonomy, the discussions about his assets, and the verbal abuse levied tonight against both him and myself. She finally looked at me. I gave her a small, proud smile. She had been magnificent. Then I turned to my family, the children I had raised, the heirs to my empire. Their faces were a beautiful mosaic of shock, horror, and dawning, terrible understanding. The room was silent, the only sound the faint, satisfied ticking of the hall clock. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table that I built, the table where it once held my children on my knee and fed them mashed potatoes. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet. It wasn't the voice of a frail old man. It was the voice of the man who'd built a business from nothing, the voice of a patriarch, the voice of a judge. Now, I said, looking at each of them in turn, let's talk about my will. The silence that followed my words was thicker than the dust on the unused fine china in the cabinet. It was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. I let it sit there, let it press down on them. They were drowning in it, and I was content to watch them gasp. Susan was the first to break. Of course she was. Her face, which had been a mask of furious, self-righteous indignation, crumpled. The anger didn't vanish. It was simply overwhelmed by a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated panic. Her eyes, wide and darting, looked from me to Maria, no, to the investigator and back to me, as if trying to find a crack in the reality that had just been dropped on her head like anvil. A private investigator, she whispered, the words barely audible. You hired someone to spy on us. I hired someone to observe. I corrected, my voice calm, almost conversational. The spying was just a bonus feature. You provided the script. I just wanted to see how the play would end. David finally found his voice. It was hoarse, stripped of its usual bluster. Dad, this is insane. This is a betrayal. How could you? How could I? I repeated, letting a sliver of the cold anger I'd been nursing 4 months finally show through. How could I? Let's see. I spent nights in a hospital bed, listening to my children divvy up my life's work like it was a pizza. I've endured your visits, which were nothing more than inventory checks. I've watched you look at me not as your father, but as a problem to be solved and an ATM to be drained. You speak of betrayal, David. You wouldn't know betrayal if it walked up and slapped you with a subpoena. Chloe started to cry. Not the performative, pretty tears she used to get her way, but real, messy, shock sobs. Grandpa, we love you. We were just worried you were worried about your inheritance. Chloe, I said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that made her flinch. There's a difference. A profound one. Love doesn't run a constant cost-benefit analysis. Love doesn't see a caregiver's kindness as a threat to its bottom line. Mark, who had been staring at Maria with a look of bewildered hurt, finally spoke. So none of it was real. The conversations about baseball, the all of it. He sounded like a kid who'd just found out his favorite superhero was a fraud. Maria turned her cool, professional gaze on him. The care was real, Mark. The help I provided your grandfather was genuine. The conversations were a means to an end, part of establishing my cover, but the data collected was the primary objective. The data, Susan spat, finding a fragment of her fury. She pointed a shaking finger at the folder on the table. You recorded us. In his home. That's illegal. He'll have your license. He'll sue you. Single party consent states, Ms. Abernathy, Maria replied, her tone utterly flat, as if she were reading from a legal textbook. As your father is the owner of the property and a participant in, or privy to, all recorded conversations, it is entirely legal. Furthermore, my contract and actions have been vetted by Mr. Henderson, your father's attorney. Any attempt to litigate would be ill-advised. The discovery process would make for very unpleasant reading. That shut her up. The threat of sunlight, of having their private greed exposed in a public courtroom, was a paralyzing agent. Susan sank back into her chair, deflated. I looked at them, my family, sitting around the ruins of a dinner I had orchestrated as their final exam. They had failed. Spectacularly. The report, I said, nodding to the folder, will be comprehensive. It will note every instance of discussing my assets as if I were already dead. It will document the pressure applied to move me into a managed facility to free up the house. It will include the numerous suggestions to simplify my financial portfolio by transferring control to you. It will, of course, feature the audio from this evening's outburst. Susan's vocabulary was particularly illuminating. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My hip gave a twinge, a reminder of the fall that had started all this, but I ignored it. For the first time in months, I felt strong. I felt in control. The terms of my will are being finalized with Mr. Henderson tomorrow, I said, looking down at them. You will each receive a copy. You will not like it. The bulk of my estate, including this house, my investments, and your mother's jewelry, will be placed into a charitable trust. The proceeds will fund music programs for underprivileged children. It's what Eleanor would have wanted. A collective gasp went around the table. Even Maria's professional mask slipped for a second, her eyebrows raising slightly. This, too, was a new development. I was flying by the seat of my pants now, and it was liberating. You can't do that, David choked out, lurching to his feet. That's our money, our legacy. It is my money, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, earned with my sweat and my brains. And you have shown yourselves entirely unworthy of it. A legacy. What legacy? A legacy of entitlement, of greed, of waiting for me to die. No, it'll leave a legacy that actually does some good in the world. One that doesn't have your names on it. I turned to leave the room. It said my piece. The rest was just cleanup. As for the four of you, I said, pausing at the doorway, you will each receive a single, lump sum payment. Enough to be comfortable, enough to ensure no one can say I left my children destitute, but it will be a fraction of what you expected. Consider it a severance package for services not rendered. I didn't wait for their responses. I walked out of the dining room, through the kitchen, and into my study, closing the door firmly behind me. I left them there, sitting in the wreckage, with Maria the implacable, professional investigator as their warden. I poured myself to fingers of a very old, very expensive scotch, a gift from a business partner, long since retired. I didn't drink it. I just held the glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light from my desk lamp. My hand was steady. The tremor was gone. The performance was over. About 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in. Maria entered. She had shed the investigator's demeanor, and was back to being just Maria, though the knowledge of who she really was now hung in the air between us. She held the folder in her hand. They've left, she said simply. And it was about what you'd expect. Denial, anger, more denial, threats of legal action, which I reiterated would be unwise. A great deal of crying from your granddaughter. Your son looked shell-shocked. Your daughter looked like she wanted to set me on fire. She said it all with a clinical detachment, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion. Good, I said. I took a sip of the scotch. It was smooth and smoky, a taste of better days. Sit down, Maria, please. She sat in the worn leather armchair across from my desk, the one Eleanor always used to read in. The house, she said, The will. You didn't mention that to Mr. Mendelssohn or myself. That was a significant improvisation. I got caught up in the moment, I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time that night. It worked, didn't it? Her head nearly exploded. It was effective, she conceded, a small smile touching her own lips. But sir, you don't have to do that. Leave me the house. My job was to gather information. The contract has been fulfilled. I looked at her, this sharp, brave, kind young woman who had walked into a lion's den on my behalf and never flinched. The contract is for the investigation, I said. What I do with my assets is my business. And I meant what I said. You have shown more genuine care and respect for me in 6 weeks than my own flesh and blood has in 6 years. You saw a lonely old man, and you were kind to him, not because you had to be, but because it's who you are. That's worth more to me than you can possibly imagine. I leaned forward. The offer stands. The house is yours, if you want it. She was silent for a long time, looking down at her hands, then around the study, at the shelves groaning with books, the photographs of a long life, the ghost of Eleanor in every corner. It's too much, she said finally, her voice soft. It's a beautiful, painful, wonderful house full of a family's history. It's not my history. It would be a museum, and I'm not a curator. I'm just me. Her refusal, gentle and firm, only made me respect her more. She wasn't a gold digger. She never had been. She was, quite simply, a good person. Then what would you have me do? I asked. The trust is happening. The money is going to the kids. But I owe you a debt far beyond your fee. She thought for a moment. The cottage, she said. The one you mentioned to your daughter. The one on the lake. The little something. Leave me that. If the offer is still genuine, a token, somewhere quiet I can go to think. That feels right. I nodded slowly. The cottage. The dilapidated shack. It was perfect. It's yours. Thank you, she said. And she meant it. We sat in a comfortable silence for a few moments. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a strange emptiness in its wake. The battle was won. The enemy was routed. Now there was just the quiet. What happens now? Marie asked. Now, I said, sighing. I imagine there will be a period of siege warfare. They'll try to love bomb me. They'll send flowers. They'll call constantly. They'll bring the grandchildren around to manipulate me. They'll try to prove they've changed. And have they? She asked, her tone neutral. I barked a short, harsh laugh. Not a chance. They're just scared. They've had a shock to the system. They'll be on their best behavior until the new will is irrevocable. And then they'll go right back to who they are. Leopards don't change their spots. They just learn to hide them better when the zookeeper is watching. I was right. The next few weeks were a masterclass in performative penitence. Susan showed up every other day with casseroles she'd clearly bought from a gourmet store and transferred into her own dishes. She'd tried to engage me in conversation, her voice dripping with a saccharine concern that made my teeth ache. She never mentioned Maria, or the investigation, or the will. It was as if it had never happened. She was playing a long game, trying to rebuild the bridge she herself had napalmed. David called every Sunday, like clockwork. His conversations were strained, filled with talk of baseball and the weather. He was trying to find a new normal, a safe, neutral territory where we could pretend to be a father and son who liked each other. Chloe sent a long, handwritten letter, full of florid apologies and declarations of love. It read like a bad soap opera script. Mark sent a text. Sorry about how things went down. A lemkey if you need anything. It was pathetic and transparent. Through it all, Maria was a steady presence. Her official investigation was over. Artie Mendelssohn had sent his final invoice, which I paid with a hefty bonus. But Maria kept coming, not as an investigator, but as a friend. She'd help with the heavier chores. We'd have lunch. We'd talk. She was the only one who didn't treat me like a bomb that might go off or a prize to be won. She treated me like Tom. I signed the new will, Henderson's office, with Maria as one of the witnesses. The old lawyer had looked at me over his spectacles, his expression grim. Tom, are you absolutely sure about this? This will cause a permanent rift. The rift was already there, Henderson, it said, in just building a fence on my side of it. A week after the will was signed and notarized, the love bombing stopped. The calls from David became less frequent. Susan's casseroles ceased to appear. The silence returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of neglect. It was the silence of a standoff. They were licking their wounds, recalculating their strategy. The inheritance was still a motivator, but the threat was now clear. I had taken the prize off the table. They were waiting, I knew, for the next move, for me to die. I didn't plan on accommodating them anytime soon. The seasons changed. The fierce heat of summer gave way to the crisp gold of autumn. The leaves on the oak tree outside my window turned fiery red and fell, carpeting the lawn. My hip healed. I could walk without the cane. I felt, against all odds, alive. Maria had the keys to the cottage. She had gone up there a few times on her days off, sending me pictures of the lake, the overgrown garden. She was starting to tame. She had found an old rowboat tied up at the rickety dock, and had spent an afternoon bailing it out. It floats. Her text had read, accompanied by a picture of her triumphant, smiling face, smudged with dirt. One evening in late October, I was in the study, reading, when the doorbell rang. It was unusual. It was after 8. I wasn't expecting anyone. I got up and went to the door. Standing on the porch, illuminated by the yellow porch light, was Susan. But it wasn't the perfectly coiffed, corporate Susan I was used to. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked unraveled. "Dad," she said, her voice raw. "Susan." I didn't open the screen door. "What is it? Can I come in? Please. It's important." There was a desperation in her voice I hadn't heard before. This wasn't an act. Reluctantly, I unlatched the door and let her in. She walked past me into the living room and stood wringing her hands. "What's going on?" I asked, my guard still firmly up. "It's Mark," she said, her voice cracking. "Is his startup?" It collapsed. Completely. Hayes in trouble, Dad. Bad trouble. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. He took out loans. Big ones. From people you don't want to owe money to. He was so sure it was going to work. He leveraged everything. His house is already in foreclosure. And these men, they've been to his apartment. They've threatened him. Hayes terrified. She started to cry. Real, ugly tears that shook her whole body. He came to me, Dad. He begged me for help. But I can't. We can't. David and I, we've looked at our finances with the change in circumstances. We don't have that kind of liquidity. We can't get a second mortgage on our houses fast enough. These men, they aren't patient. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Dad, you have to help him. Hayes your grandson. He made a stupid mistake. But he doesn't deserve whatever these people will do to him. Please. I stood there, watching my daughter beg for her son's safety. The irony was so thick I could taste it. All their plans, their greed, their focus on the big prize had blinded them to the real-world dangers. They'd been playing Monopoly while real life was playing for keeps. And part of me, the cold, vengeful part that had hired Maria, wanted to say no, to let them suffer the consequences of their own short-sightedness, to let the bed they'd made become their prison. But looking at Susan's utterly broken face, I didn't see the avaricious vulture. I saw a mother, terrified for her child. It was the first genuine, selfless emotion I'd seen from any of them in years. How much? I asked, my voice gruff. She named a figure. It was a significant sum, not enough to cripple me, but enough to leave a mark, enough to be painful. I walked over to my desk, picked up my checkbook. My hands were steady. I wrote out the check, the pen scratching loudly in the silent room. I tore it out and held it out to her. She stared at it, then at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're just giving it to me. It's not for you, I said. It's for Mark, and it's a loan, not a gift. He will pay me back, every cent, with interest. I'll have Henderson draw up the papers. He will be on a payment plan for the next 20 years. It will be a constant reminder of the cost of his arrogance and your family's collective stupidity. She took the check, her hand trembling. The amount was written in clear, bold numbers. It was a lifeline, and it was also a chain. Thank you, she whispered, fresh tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Dad. Get out of my house, Susan, I said, my voice tired. And fix your son. She nodded, clutching the check like a holy relic, and hurried out the door. I stood in the silent living room for a long time after she left. The anger was gone. The desire for revenge had been satisfied, and then somehow made hollow by what had just happened. I had won. I had exposed them and humiliated them and secured my victory. But it tasted like ashes. I picked up the phone and dialed Maria's number. She answered on the second ring. Tom, everything all right? I need a favor, I said, my voice sounding old and weary to my own ears. A real one. Not part of the job. Name it. Can you do some digging? Discreetly. My grandson, Mark, his business. I need to know how deep the trouble really is. I need to know who these men are that he owes money to. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That falls outside my usual purview. That's getting into financial forensics, possibly organized crime. I know, I said. Use Artie's resources. Bill me. I don't care about the cost. I just need to know what I've just stepped in. Consider it done, she said, her voice all business. The investigator was back. He'll call you tomorrow. She was true to her word. She called me the next afternoon. Her voice was grim. It's not good, Tom. The startup was a house of cards. He was using new investor money to pay off old investors. A classic Ponzi scheme. Though I'm not sure he was smart enough to know that's what he was doing. The people he owes, it's a known outfit. Nasty piece of work. They've moved beyond threats. They've firebombed a car belonging to a guy who owed them less than Mark does. My blood ran cold. Susan hadn't been exaggerating. This was far more serious than I had imagined. The check I gave him I started. Will pacify them for a while, Maria finished. But it won't make them go away. They see a source of funds now. They'll be back. They always come back. I sank into my chair. I tried to teach them a lesson about greed. And I had inadvertently thrown my grandson to the wolves. A much more dangerous kind of wolf than I had ever been. What do I do? I asked. It was the first time I had asked anyone for help in a very long time. You let me handle it, Maria said, her voice calm and assured. This is what I'm trained for. Well, not exactly, but it's closer to my skill set than baking coq au vin. Give me the information. I'll make some calls. We need to negotiate with these people. You can't just pay them off, you have to make them go away. Permanently. How? You leave that to me and Artie. We have contacts. It won't be pretty, and it won't be free. It will cost you more than that check you wrote. A lot more. I don't care about the money, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The money had become a curse. Just make it stop. Make him safe. Okay, she said. Okay, Tom. I'll make it stop. It took 3 days. 3 days of tense phone calls, of meetings in nondescript offices, of negotiations conducted in hushed tones. Maria was my general, and I was the bankroller. She reported back in vague terms, shielding me from the worst of the details. I didn't want to know. I transferred large sums of money into accounts she specified. I signed papers I didn't fully understand. At the end of it, she came to the house. She looked exhausted, but satisfied. It's done, she said, sinking into the chair in my study. The debt is settled. The matter is closed. They won't bother Mark again. Hay's been officially uninteresting to them. How much? I asked. She told me. The number was staggering. It was more than I had left to each of my children in the new will. The irony was almost poetic. My revenge had cost me a fortune. Thank you, Maria, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders that was far heavier than the financial one. I don't know how to, you don't have to, she said. We're even. The cottage covers it, and then some. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustle the last of the leaves outside. What now? She asked. Now, I said, I think I need to have a family meeting. A real one. No investigators. No hidden agendas. Just what's left of us. She nodded. Do you want me to be there? No, I said. This is something I have to do alone. I didn't call a meeting. Summoning them felt too much like a king calling his disgraced courtiers. And that wasn't the energy I wanted. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, and to rub their noses in it now would be petty. Worse, it would be redundant. They knew. Instead, I sent a simple group text. No emojis, no explanations. Dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. In cooking, the responses were telling in their brevity. Okay. From David, well be there. From Susan, a thumbs up emoji from Mark. Nothing from Chloe. I didn't expect a reply from her. Her worldview, which placed her at the center of a universe that owed her admiration and vintage jewelry, had been fundamentally shaken. It'd become a problematic plot twist in the story of Chloe. Sunday arrived. Grey and drizzly, a perfect reflection of the mood I imagined was descending upon my children. I spent the day in the kitchen. I wasn't making coq au vin or a perfect tart tatin. I was making my famous, or rather infamous, chili. It was Eleanor's recipe, a holdover from our lean early years, packed with cheap beans, tough cuts of meat that needed long simmering, and a reckless amount of spice. It was honest, unpretentious, stick-to-your-ribs food. It was the culinary equivalent of a truth bomb. By 6 o'clock, the house was filled with the rich, peppery scent. I'd set the table myself, with our old stoneware bowls and mismatched spoons. No fine china. This wasn't a celebration. They arrived almost exactly at 6, a testament to their newfound, nervous punctuality. They came in together, a united front of apprehension, shedding damp coats in the hallway. The greetings were stiff, a mumbled chorus of "Hi, Dad. Smells good," David offered, a pathetic attempt at normalcy. "It'll clear your sinuses," I said, stirring the pot. "Sit down. It's ready." We served ourselves in silence. The only sounds were the ladle scraping against the pot and the dull clink of bowls on the table. They sat, looking at the steaming, dark red concoction as if it might be poisoned. I took my seat at the head of the table. My table. I picked up my spoon and started eating. I didn't wait for them. After a moment, they followed suit. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of eating. It was Susan who broke first, her voice tight. "This is very spicy, Dad." "Life is spicy," I said, not looking up from my bowl. Another minute of agonizing quiet. I could feel the questions hanging in the air, thick as the chili fumes. They were waiting for me to speak, to declare the terms of the armistice. I finished my bowl and pushed it away. I looked at each of them in turn. Susan, her face pinched with anxiety. David, avoiding my gaze. Mark, looking younger and more lost than I'd ever seen him. "Mark's situation has been resolved," I said, my voice flat. "The people he was involved with have been paid. They won't be back." Mark's head snapped up. "You paid them?" "All of it." The relief on his face was so profound it was almost painful to look at. "I did, Dad. Thank you." Susan breathed, her hand going to her heart. "Oh, God. Thank you. You don't know what awaits." "It's a loan," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her gratitude like a knife. "As I told Susan, not a gift. You will pay back every cent, with interest. Henderson is drawing up the paperwork. The terms will be strict. It will take you decades." The relief on Mark's face curdled into something else. Shock, then resentment. "Decades. But it's the consequence," I said. "You don't get to skip that part. The consequence of your spectacularly bad decisions isn't just a lesson learned, it's a debt owed. Literally. That's not fair." The words burst out of him, petulant and childish. "You have so much. What's it to you?" "It's the principle," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's me not rewarding catastrophic failure. It's me ensuring you feel the weight of your choices for a very, very long time, so you never forget. Fear doesn't enter into it. This is the deal, the only deal. You can take it and be free of those men, or you can leave it and deal with them yourself. Your choice." He stared at me, his mouth open, then looked down at his bowl, chastised. He knew he had no leverage, had spent it all. "Well, pay it, Dad," David said quickly, shooting a warning look at his son. Of course we will. We're grateful. Really. I know you are, I said. But that's not why we're here. I took a sip of water, letting the tension settle back over us. We're here because we need to understand each other. Really understand. The performance is over. The investigator is gone. The hidden microphones are off. It's just us, the Abernathy family. Such as it is. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, my gaze sweeping over them. For the last year, I have watched you. I have listened to you. I have seen the avarice and the entitlement and the naked greed that festered under the surface of your polite visits and your concerned phone calls. I saw you for what you are, and it broke my heart. Susan opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing her. I am not blameless in this. I let myself become a caricature. The cranky old man, the difficult father. It was easier than being vulnerable. It was easier than admitting how lonely I was after your mother died. I pushed you away, and you, in turn, saw me not as a person to be loved, but as a resource to be managed and, eventually, liquidated. We failed each other. The admission hung in the air. It wasn't an apology. It was a statement of fact. A diagnosis. The will is changed. I continued. It is irrevocable. The trust is being established. The music programs will be Eleanor's legacy. Your individual bequests are locked in. They are more than fair. They are more than any of you have earned. Arguing about it, contesting it, will only waste money on lawyers and will not change a thing. This is your reality now. The gravy train has reached its final station. David looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Susan's eyes were shining with unshed tears of frustration. This was the final, unequivocal confirmation of their defeat. So, this is where we are, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. We can continue down this road. We can become a family of strangers who see each other at funerals and weddings, bound by bitterness and a shared history of mutual disappointment. We can let this money, this damnable money, be the last and only thing that connects us. I paused, letting the bleakness of that future sink in. Or, I said, we can try something else. We can start over, not as patriarch and heirs, not as a wallet and the hands waiting to grab it, but as a father and his children. Flawed, messy, having hurt each other deeply, but maybe, just maybe, capable of something more. What does that even mean? Susan asked, her voice hollow. It means you come over for dinner not to check on your investment, but to see your dad. It means you call me to talk about your day, not to subtly ask about my health. It means we talk about baseball, or books, or the damn weather, without a spreadsheet open in the background. It means you accept that my life, and my money, are mine to do with as I please, and that your lives are yours to build without the spectre of a future windfall hanging over your every decision. I looked at Mark. It means you get a job, a real one, and you start paying me back $50 at a time, and you learn the value of a dollar that you earned, not one you inherited. I looked at Chloe's empty chair. It means growing up. The silence that followed was different from the one that had begun the meal. It wasn't tense with fear or anger. It was heavy with contemplation. They were turning my words over in their minds, examining this new, stark and strangely simple path I was laying out. It won't be easy, David said finally, his voice rough. After everything, no, I agreed. It won't be. Trust is a vase. Once it's shattered, you can glue the pieces back together, but the cracks will always be there. You'll always be able to see them. The question is the vase worth repairing? Or do we just sweep up the pieces and throw them away? I stood up and started collecting the empty bowls. You don't have to decide tonight. Think about it. The door is open. The choice is yours. But know this, the game is over. The old man is retired. What you see now is just me, Tom, your father. Take it or leave it. I carried the bowls into the kitchen. I didn't look back. I heard the scrape of chairs, murmured goodbyes, and the front door opening and closing. They left without another word. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the taillights of their cars disappear into the drizzle. I felt exhausted, empty, but clean in a way I hadn't in years. The poison had been drawn from the wound. Now it was up to the body to see if it would heal, or if the limb would just wither and die. The weeks that followed were a tentative, awkward dance. The performative casseroles and stilted phone calls stopped. For a while, there was nothing, just silence. I told myself I was at peace with either outcome. Then, on a bright, cold Saturday morning in November, David showed up. He wasn't carrying anything. He wasn't dressed for a meeting. He was wearing an old pair of jeans and a worn-out jacket. "The gutters," he said by way of greeting, standing on my porch. "They're full of leaves. You'll get ice dams. I've got the ladder in my truck." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded. "The ladder's in the garage, but it's heavy. You'll need help getting it down." He nodded back. "Okay." We spent the morning cleaning the gutters. We didn't talk much. The work was physical, familiar. Had done this chore for me, since he was a teenager. There was a rhythm to it that bypassed all the recent ugliness. He'd hold the ladder. I'd hand him tools. It was practical. It was real. When we were done, his hands were raw from the cold and dirt. I made us both coffee, strong and black, the way we both liked it. We drank it sitting on the porch steps, watching the steam rise into the chilly air. "The Braves traded Miller," he said after a long silence. I said. "Dumb move. He was their best reliever." "Bullpen's a disaster," he grumbled. "Always is," I replied. And that was it. We sat there, drinking our coffee, talking about baseball. It was a start. A few days later, Susan came by. She didn't bring a casserole. She brought a photograph she'd found while cleaning her attic. It was a picture of me and Eleanor, young and laughing, standing in front of this very house the day we bought it. My arm was around her, and she was holding a set of keys like they were the crown jewels. "I thought you might like to have it," she said, her voice hesitant. I took the photograph. The colors were faded, but the joy in our faces was timeless. It was a punch to the gut, but a good one, a reminder of what it was all for. "Thank you, Susan," I said, and I meant it. "This means a lot." She stayed for tea. We didn't talk about money or wills or caregivers. We talked about our mother. We told stories. Some of them made us laugh. One of them made her cry. I didn't try to stop her. I just handed her a tissue. Mark started showing up every other Sunday. He'd mow the lawn in the fall, shovel the walk when it snowed. He was quiet, subdued. The entitled brat had been scared out of him, replaced by a young man who was slowly, painfully, learning some humility. He'd show me his budget, his payment plan. It was pathetic, but it was earnest. He was trying. Chloe was the last holdout. I didn't push it. Some seeds take longer to germinate. The seasons turned. Winter laid a blanket of white over the world, and the old house felt peaceful, not lonely. I had my routines. I read. I listened to music. I talked to Maria on the phone once a week. She'd fixed up the cottage, had even managed to get the old fireplace working. She sent me a picture of her first Christmas there, a small tree twinkling in the corner. She looked happy, truly happy. The family dinners became a semi-regular thing. They were still a little awkward. The ghost of the grand confrontation, always at the table with us. But the avarice was gone. The tension was just the normal, low-grade tension that exists in any family. We were learning each other again, not as roles, the inheritance, the heirs, but as people. Flawed, complicated people. It was on a bright Sunday in early spring, with the first crocuses pushing through the thawing earth, that Chloe finally appeared. She stood on the porch, looking nervous, clutching a small pot with a hyacinth in it. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, her voice small. "Chloe," I said, opening the door wider. "Come in." She stepped inside, holding out the plant. "It's purple. I remember you and Grandma always liked purple flowers." "We did," I said, taking it. The scent was sweet and heady. "Thank you." We sat in the living room. The silence was heavy. "I'm sorry," she blurted out after a minute. I've been a jerk. I was mad and embarrassed, and I didn't know how to come back. "It's okay," I said. "It's not," she said, and to my surprise, her eyes filled with real tears. "I miss Grandma, and I miss when this house felt like a home, and I was so obsessed with her stuff, with the aesthetic of her, that I forgot to miss the her of her." Does that make sense? It did. It was the most insightful thing anyone had said to me in years. It makes perfect sense, I said. I've been seeing someone, she said, wiping her eyes. A therapist. She's helping me figure a lot of this out. The entitlement stuff. It's pretty ugly. It usually is, I said. But recognizing it is the first step. The most important one. She nodded. I'd like her to come around more. If that's okay. Not for you, no. Just to be here. I'd like that. Chloe, I said. And I meant it. She started coming over on Thursday afternoons. She'd bring her sketch pad and draw while I read. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd just sit in a comfortable silence. She asked me about Eleanor. Not about her jewelry, but about what she was like as a young woman. What her dreams were. What made her laugh. I told her stories I hadn't thought about in decades. It was like introducing my wife to my granddaughter all over again. One afternoon, she was looking at the bookshelf, at the small, carved wooden box where Eleanor had kept her most cherished pieces. The one with the silver necklace. Do you ever take them out? Chloe asked. Sometimes, I said. Can I see them? Not to have, just to see. I got the box and brought it over to the couch. I opened it. The light caught the silver and the stones, sparkling against the dark velvet. Chloe reached out a finger and gently touched the necklace she'd once demanded. It's more beautiful than I remembered, she whispered. It is, I agreed. She looked at me, her eyes clear. Will you tell me about the day she wore this? The real story. So I did. I told her about the small, simple ceremony, about how nervous I was, how Eleanor's hand had trembled when I put the ring on her finger, how she'd laughed later because she'd been so worried about losing the necklace that she'd barely heard the vows. Chloe listened, her chin resting on her hands, her artist's eyes seeing the scene unfold. She wasn't looking at a piece of vintage jewelry anymore. She was looking at a piece of her history. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she closed the lid of the box and pushed it gently back toward me. Thank you, Grandpa, she said, for keeping her safe. It was the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The vase was mended. The cracks were still there. If you looked closely, they always would be. But it was whole. It could hold water again. Today is my 80th birthday. The family is coming over. All of them. David is bringing the beer. Susan is making a salad. Mark is in charge of music. Chloe offered to bake a cake, a prospect that fills me with a certain dread. But I told her I couldn't be more thrilled. I'm sitting on the porch, waiting for them. The late afternoon sun is warm on my face. The oak tree is in full leaf, casting dappled shadows on the lawn. My hip doesn't even twinge anymore. A car pulls into the driveway. It's not one of theirs. It's Maria's. She gets out, carrying a bottle of that good scotch I like. She's smiling. You didn't think he'd miss your birthday, did you? She says, coming up the steps. I hoped you wouldn't, I say, and I realize it's true. She's part of the story now. A good part. She sits in the rocking chair next to me. How's the family? They're a work in progress, I say. But so am I. She nods, understanding. We sit in a comfortable silence, watching the world go by. The investigator and the mark. The caregiver and the patriarch. Now, just two friends. The revenge he'd planned. The grand conundrum. Feels like a story from another life. It had been a scorched earth policy, designed to burn down the rotten structure of our relationships to the ground. I'd thought that was the only way. But something else happened. The fire I set didn't just destroy, it cleared the land. It burned away the undergrowth of greed and expectation, leaving behind a fertile, if ash-covered, soil. And from that soil, something new is growing. Something slower, something more fragile, but something real. It wasn't the revenge I wanted. It was the reckoning we needed. I hear more cars pulling up. David's truck, Susan's sedan, doors slamming, voices laughing, the sound of my family arriving. I look at Maria and smile. Show time. She grins back. Let's go eat some cake. I get up from my chair, a little stiffly, and go to open the door.